Ni hao, pimps! Wreckreation 2 has been announced, and you're probably scratching your head, pondering, questioning life, and very likely asking yourself, what do you mean Wreckreation 2? Why announce it so soon? Hell, the first game isn't finished. And whilst I do think those are good questions, especially the last one, I am going to try to answer all of those questions, and maybe even more. To start things off, I think it's not a shock to say that Treefield's track record has been less than stellar. Hell, originally I wasn't even considering buying Wreckreation, but one thing led to another and I decided to buy the game. I didn't like Wreckreation. Hell, I still kinda don't. And it's only really because the single player loop was bad, but also unfixable. Anyhow, whilst my disdain for the game was strong, and for some reason, God knows why, I left feedback, and my god were they detailed. To my awe and amazement, the team listened to my feedback and did their best to implement the changes I recommended. Well, okay, it's selfish of me to say that I was the sole person responsible with the feedback, but realistically there were only a few people that really went into depth when it came to telling what was right and what needed improvements. Needless to say, the team genuinely listened to feedback, and I think it's super important to keep in mind as I am about to speak more about the whole situation of why Wreckreation 2 even exists. Alright, why does Wreckreation 2 exist? Why not just support the first game? This is honestly simple to answer. The first game, for the lack of better terms, was a financial failure. Games simply didn't sell well. Now I think everyone probably wanted a No Man's Sky situation, where the game had numerous updates that improved the game to it being good, but realistically No Man's Sky did that in 10 years, and the sad reality is that it was simply not going to be possible, especially after December. To clarify, Wreckreation was developed by Treefield's Entertainment, but was published by THQ Nordic. When you go for a publisher, you are given money if you need it to finish development of the game, but in return, your game needs to sell enough copies to bring back the money to the publisher. When you release a game under the publisher, you agree on a split when it comes to the game's sales. One part goes to the store as a fee, second part goes to the publisher, and third part goes to the developer company. This is the most layman, overly simplified explanation that, in this case, is valid. Now, when your game is a financial failure, publishers will do multiple things to try and bring back any profits. In Wreckreation's case, THQ decided that all of the future sales of the games would primarily go to THQ themselves, minus the store tax, effectively leaving Treefields on their own. Treefields opened up a Patreon, and whilst the current earnings are around $2,000 a month, the harsh reality is that Treefields is a company at the end of the day, and $2,000 a month is simply not enough to really support the first game in any capacity. For example, any update after December was done for free with no income. There was only one logical move that was left, which was to make a sequel. Now of course, making a sequel effectively leaves the first game in a state that isn't great, but it's sadly a necessary evil, as it was either make a new game or completely go under, which in current day and age you see a lot of. The announcement did attract a fair bit of negativity, coming not only from the side of people wondering why releasing it so early, which A, I have explained above, but also B, I find it a bit idiotic, because realistically Burnout was a yearly franchise itself, but also from the people that don't see the competence in the team anymore. Having played Danger Zone 2, Dangerous Driving, and Wreckreation myself, I do see what people mean. However, and a huge however, Wreckreation 2 is being developed with transparency in mind, and from my experience with Wreckreation 2's feedback, they really do work fast. We have gone through iterations of handling alone, going from where I slightly hated it to genuinely thinking it's good, in a matter of a couple of days. How is the game, you might ask? Honestly, kinda good. Of course, I think I have to say and clarify that this is pre-alpha footage. Everything you see is subject to change. The game is structured more normally. The progression is fairly linear and honestly reminds me of Burnout 3, whilst the gimmick being that it's an open world, as in you drive to the events yourself or start them on the map. I wish menus were more present, as in when you finish event, you had an option to go to the event select, as I'm more of an old-fashioned person, and I'll prefer menuing always over free roaming. The events themselves are a massive step up over the first game, and honestly even over Paradise. One big gripe with Paradise was the fact that you had to win races and pass certain goals in road rages, and you didn't have an option to get either silver or bronze. Wreckreation 2 has that, even in road rages, which I think is great. If I were to have a gripe with road rage, it would be the wreck limit system being not car-based but instead still event-based, with the aggression car, Nebraska, only adding an extra wreck limit, while being most likely a more tanky car than the Night Ranger. Races, however, a massive improvement. Even over Paradise, I never liked open world races, and whilst on paper cool, the reality is that the game gave you the best route to take, which the AI wouldn't do, so the cars would get split up and the battle racing part of the game was non-existent. Wreckreation did kinda mitigate that by adding checkpoints, but the issue with that game was that the map was bland as fuck with no barriers whatsoever to keep you on the road, and as a result, the game was fairly boring. Wreckreation 2 thankfully mitigates that with having actual barriers that keep you on the road, in the form of classic chevron barriers and buildings. Oh yeah, the map! Okay, so moments ago I said that the map was bland with the first game. Thankfully that's not the case with this game. The playtest we were provided with had a city called Heartbreak City, and honestly, it's quite a good place. There are various areas that do feel really distinct from each other, which makes the city not feel samey. Only real criticism with the city I have is the fact that I would like to see more verticality. Maybe an above ground railway station, sorry, not station, but railway itself, like in Burnout 3's downtown area. But that's pretty much it. The difficulty, thank God, is good. First for the franchise and for the team itself, because I don't think Criterion even had that, there's a difficulty selection. And I can say that, at harder difficulties, the game really does kick ass. The AI does not fuck around. The only aspect about higher difficulties that I don't really like is the fact that at higher difficulties the cars are more resilient to hits. Now I wouldn't say that that's a huge issue, but with these games being rather spectacle based in takedowns, having a feature that kinda mitigates that is a little bit annoying. Here is where I do talk about criticisms that I do have. Although again, most of the criticisms I have can be easily resolved since the team is genuinely competent. Handling is alright, although drifting is still not perfect. That being said, improvements are constantly being made. Car combat suffers from visual feedback, or slightly lack of. One huge gripe I have with combat is the ping-ponging that I get from when I hit a rival. It's an annoying bug that I hope gets resolved soon. Another thing with visual feedback is the cars that you do hit don't really react to hits visually. I would like to see cars a little bit, swerve before they either recover. Of course, I do have much more criticisms, but I can't really talk about those. For example, the HUD talk is not really useful right now, as HUD besides the color palette change hasn't really been worked on. Same goes for crashes and a lack of visual polish. All of that will get improved over time, and I feel that talking about it now is just simply too early. With that, my final thoughts are that I'm honestly cautiously optimistic with the game. I know that when Tides Turn, which this is the new company name, is currently fighting an uphill battle, but if the team plays their cards right, I could see this game being a success. With that, I will be seeing you all around. Have a good rest of the day.